Okay, so yeah, I'll just make a few quick words. I'm Anatoly. This is going to be my main project. It's a DAO whose goal is to enhance human intelligence. Now you might ask, what's the relationship of that to bioacceleration in general? Well, I'll be talking about this, but one of my main thesis is that I think it does create an integral whole with life extension because, well, I mean, I'll talk with this. So, yes, Sophia DAO, the case for radical human intelligence enhancement. So yeah, why I came to Zelar.City? Because I support life extension, obviously. I want to live forever, or at least indefinitely. And I think that if you have smarter people, then the chances of you being able to do that is higher. And just a quick background to myself. My main background is in economics, but I've also been interested in intelligence research from an early age, ever since I saw those national IQ tables and saw that they had pretty good correlations with national outcomes such as GDP per capita. My other main influence from a very early age was transhumanism. In particular, the singularity is near was my formative influence. And that's where like the interest in life extension and eventually crypto and eventually DeSci and so on came from. Just to briefly explain my main projects, you can check out my blog, EHC Zone, Elite Human Capital. It emerged out of a meme on Twitter. I'm expanding it into a book, The Biosingularity is Near, that's its provisional title. And I also want to double it as a DAO that funds research into human intelligence enhancement and promotes the space and so on. So yeah, I mean, if you want to see a version of this talk in a article format, check out EHC.zone. It's the pinned article there. So yeah, I will now talk about why intelligence is important, and then briefly describe what the point of Sophia DAO is. What is intelligence? Standard definition, Linda Gottfredson, psychologist. Intelligence is the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, learn from experience. Or Piaget put it in a more poetic form, intelligence is what you need when you don't know what to do. So it basically implies a kind of creative and innovative element as well, as opposed to just raw problem solving. That's the brief intro to what we know about intelligence. None of this is controversial. If you ask psychometrists, you will see that there's no significant controversy over this summary. But in short, intelligence can be rigorously and reliably measured. It follows a continuum according to a normal curve or the bell curve. It all loads on a common factor of intelligence, which is called the G factor. So verbal abilities, numerical abilities, logical abilities, they all correlate with each other, and that common factor is the G factor. It seems to be universal across human cultures, as well as even the animal kingdom. They found it for dogs, even for teleost fish. It does seem to be a truly universal construct. It's also by far the most well-replicated branch of the psychological sciences. Many of you will have heard of the replication crisis that struck psychology and social sciences several years ago. Ironically, psychometrics was largely immune to this, so you can cite Steven Pinker on this as an authority. And what we will now come to is that it's also highly predictive of individual life success and group outcomes. So at the individual level, intelligence predicts things like income, crime rates, job performance, genius, educational success, even longevity. So the polygenic score for intelligence is actually like extremely predictive of expected mortality rates as well, incidentally. So it's not something that's, it seems to be a kind of like, if this was an RPG game, the intelligence stat would seem to be an extremely overpowered one. which you might think it's unfair, but it is what it is, and it's a reality that we have to live with. The very strong correlations between intelligence and all manner of life success measures. And it's even stronger at the level of groups, such as countries. There's a 0.9 correlation between GDP per capita and national IQ scores, or measures of national cognitive abilities, such as the PISA or TIMSS, International Standardized Assessments. The only systemic outliers to this fall into two main groups. The first group are the countries which spent a long time under communist regimes in the 20th century. They are much poorer than expected, so these are the red ones over here, the red ones over there. And countries with resource windfalls, primarily oil exporters, countries that have a lot of oil per capita, those are the ones in black, and they are, to the contrary, very sharp upwards exceptions. So as you can see, Kuwait, Norway, United Arab Emirates, all the way up there, and to the contrary, China, Eastern Europe to a less extent, they underperform their national IQ scores. But otherwise, the correlation is very good. I can't really go into the details because I think I've got 15 or 20 minutes to do this talk. But national IQ scores are more explanatory and predictive than potential other explanations, such as education spending, institutions, time preference. I did a study on that. And furthermore, countries that have seen a stronger so-called Flynn effect. The Flynn effect refers to the increase in national IQ scores seen over the past few decades. Countries that saw a stronger Flynn effect also saw higher GDP growth on average, to sort of further reinforce that association. Now, why would smarter countries tend to perform better economically? Again, can't really go into that in much detail, but basically you have very complex production processes, such as constructing an airline or a merger and acquisition, and there's only a limited number of smart people who can solve these kinds of tasks, the IQ thresholds. And these people and groups, they command a premium in the world economy. And this largely explains why, even though the quality of a haircut you might get in, say, here in Germany and in a country like Egypt, they would be similar in quality, but Germans are 10 times as rich and have much higher wages. They just have many more sectors that are so-called O-ring sectors that require the successful completion of a series of complex tasks reliably. And there's also a very strong correlation, and this is more relevant to some of the themes that have been talked about, is that there's also a very strong correlation between intelligence levels and scientific productivity. Now, this is a measure of IQ, and the vertical axis is the Nature Index. The Nature Index is an index of elite science production, essentially, a list of about 50 or 60 journals, which are judged by a panel of experts to be the most prestigious in their fields, and the density of publications to them from different countries. So as we can see, the United States, the EU, and East Asia, they basically dominate everything. And countries that are below average IQ of 90, they don't really produce much at all. I mean, they're not, in terms of absolute productivity, as you can see, I mean, they're barely noticeable. But if you do a logarithmic chart, you can see that it becomes pretty direct and linear relationship between scientific productivity and IQ. And you can see this more viscerally on this world map, which identifies the nature index in the world's various big cities. So again, like if there's basically three regions that dominate it. That's the US, that's the EU, and it's East Asia, so Japan, China, and well, big circle around Singapore. You can see Israel, you can see Moscow, but otherwise, kind of like almost can't see it. But otherwise, most of the world is pretty much a desert, and it's sad, but it's something important to bear in mind, and it's an important question, that's relevant to the prospects of future science production in particular. Now we have, in light of this, there are some potential pitfalls in the future that we are seeing play out. And if we want to get to radical life extension, we have to account for these. So the topic of fertility collapse has become quite prevalent in discussions in the past couple of years. So you have a decline in the absolute numbers of new people appearing who can be in principle capable of doing science. There's also many strong indications that the so-called Flynn effect of increasing IQ scores has reached a peak sometime around 2000, at least so far as the developed world is concerned. They're still increasing in the developing world, but the developed world has capped out, and especially since 2020, it started going down. So that again is a rather foreboding sign for the long-term future of scientific productivity, since we will now have like fewer people and like especially much fewer very smart people. There's also the problem, which has been discussed here, that since the easier problems tend to get solved first, that the low-hanging fruit get picked first. So subsequent progress becomes more difficult. Elam's law, like low-hanging fruit, And there's another problem is that you might be able to increase institutional quality, and there's a lot of talk in libertarian circles in particular about the problems with established institutions and trying to front. It's gone down by a lot since in the past 2 decades. So probably not really much scope for increasing institutional quality at this sort of like the large scale. So is it all doom and gloom? I don't think so, because there are actually pathways that we can embark on right now to enhance human intelligence. And these are just some of these approaches. Again, unfortunately, I don't have time to talk in detail about them, but the most obvious one is embryo selection for IQ. We already have screening for diseases in standard IVF cycles. In principle, there's nothing stopping you from doing a polygenic score for intelligence or other personality traits that parents might be interested in, and selecting embryos based on those factors. There's at least one company that's working on this, that's currently in stealth mode, probably going to go public next year. Another approach is adult gene editing. There's Ben Coppen and Chase Denneker had a very nice article you can check out on Les Long. Significant increases in adult intelligence through genetic editing. That's the name of the article. You can do synthetic embryos. I mean, mostly because it's easier to edit them as pluripotent cells than as embryos. You can do. The other things they're more speculative and really in their embryonic forms, but you can do direct editing for IQ. You can do iterated embryo selection, first suggested by Nick Bostrom and Carl Schulman in 2014. Nowhere near maturity, but it's out there. Just simple cloning. Cybernetics. In Vitalia, I encountered the Augmentation Lab. It's basically a company that's working on cybernetics, and there's Neuralink, like more high-profile one. Are they going to be able to increase intelligence? Well, I mean, that's an open question, but usually focus on on repairing functions as opposed to augmenting them, but we'll see, and even more speculative stuff. And the philosophical case for enhancing intelligence, just going through them. The individual level, it's that the principle of procreative beneficence, which is a philosophical principle introduced by Sandulescu, and he argues that parents might have an ethical obligation to ensure the best possible life for their children, and as we see, given the close relationship between life success and intelligence, it would actually make sense to focus on intelligence as the most malleable part of that, and also intersections with radical life extension. At the level of the group, I think you can view this from two perspectives. From the point of view of the national interest, I mean, there's presumably few like national-oriented people, but for what it's worth, the more bioconservative countries will fall behind if this kind of thing goes ahead. And more generally, societies that engage in this first and at a bigger scale, they will be more functional and they will be more interesting places to live in. So there was one survey of the 999 Society, which are people with higher than 150 IQs, very elite sample. But the general principles, they tend to support a free market, social liberalism, extreme bioliberalism, so like abortion debates, they would not be having them, cosmopolitan, technophile, and so on. So it probably quite reflective of the political preferences that characterize the audience here, I would imagine, and probably the kind of society many of us would sort of like prefer to live in than the normie politics that we actually are forced to endure. Yeah, there's like some opinion polls. You could sort of object that there will be opposition to this, but in practice, not really. I mean, there's actually quite a lot of Americans who, 38%, who actually support genetic testing of embryos if it increases their chances of getting into Harvard, and even 28% support direct gene editing. So, and once it gets going, I think that the others will be forced to follow, just to keep up. Yeah. And the final case, and I think this is the one that's perhaps most original to me, is that if we solve human intelligence, that will also increase the chances that we solve a bunch of other questions that can be classed as existential risks. So again, as we can see, there's a kind of idiocracy effect. The Flynn effect has stopped out. Eventually, if we don't have a breakthrough, we could have a new Dark Ages. If we fail to solve life extension, it's an extremely complicated process. You've all seen that chart of metabolic processes that is probably impossible for any one person to understand. Maybe there's just nobody smart enough to grok how to do it. But if there's more smart people to do it, then it would be like taking out an insurance policy on the current generation of cohort of people being too dumb to succeed at it. AI, again, is a big topic right now. AI control, AI risks. Again, probably higher chance of coming up with AI alignment strategies that can work with smarter people. And what do we even do in a solved world where we solve all of these problems? Again, I think that smarter people will have more interesting lives out of this. And I would argue that since like there's very few people actively working on intelligence enhancement, that there's actually a lot of leverage any single person can affect by going into this sector. And just to conclude, this is where my proposal for Sophia DAO comes in. It's a DAO that will fund fundamental research, issue IP NFTs related to this, fund public goods such as open biobanks. Again, access to biobank data is a very big problem in this, politically tricky. It would be very nice to have like very large biobanks that can match genotypic and phenotypic data so that we can make more better correlations between them. Benefits for staking the token. Provision access to the space for crypto investors. Again, as I've noted, there's several companies in stealth mode working on this, and right now only the VC types, accredited investors, can have access to it. It would be really cool if you could just go to Uniswap and get some exposure if you're bullish on this. And promote LeapTech in the media, on blogs, on YouTube, and so on. If you're interested in this, again, check out the Biosingularity is Near article on my blog at EHC Zone. Sophia.bio is the website. It doesn't really have much for now. It hasn't, because it hasn't launched yet. But make a bookmark if you're interested in. And my Telegram is Karlin. If you have any questions, then please feel free to write to me. So that's my talk. Thank you. Yeah, anyone have a question? Yeah, yes, Elias?
I can just
okay.
How, in your argument for why intelligence is so amazing for countries, how do you make sure that the correlation is just one way, that it's not like because the country is richer, they have better education, therefore the average IQ is higher?
Yes. There's been a bunch of articles done on this. So if you're sort of like looking for an academic reference to this, here are some articles you can check out. But like multiple regression analysis based studies. But my sort of intuitive example that I like to cite is this one, which is that the exceptions kind of prove the rule. The countries which had a communist legacy, which had very ineffective economic policies in the 20th century, under Mao's China, you literally had a bigger chance of getting fired of dying on the job than getting fired. It has it's the biggest downwards outlier, and you would expect like the rich countries, but which do not have high IQs, like they could fund education, and they do fund education to a very large extent, and would move to the right on the IQ scores, and that does actually happen to some extent, but most of the influence flows from the cognitive abilities to the economic side and not the other way around. Yeah.
Sorry, but it says down there it's derived from PISA. That's an education measure, not a biological measure.
There's very good correlations between PISA, international standardized tests such as PISA and TIMSS, and the national IQ estimates that you see in databases such as those of Richard Lynn or David Becker. Yes?
Did we identify the genes responsible for intelligence, and is it reliable? We still need to do research around it?
Yes, it's a massively polygenic trait, so there's probably been estimated that there's perhaps 500 genes that contribute to this in some way. And you can sort of trace this by looking at the biobanks and correlating the genotypic data with educational attainment scores and other proxies for intelligence. Yes, there have been like quite a lot of them identified, but a lot of them remain unidentified. So it's definitely something that requires more work. Yeah.
What you proposed is dangerously close to eugenics of the history that's well debated to be socially and philosophically not okay. What's your thought on that?
I think that like whenever people bring up the eugenics question, I emphasize its voluntary nature. There's coercive eugenics of the form that the Nazis practiced, obviously, which is completely unacceptable. And there's voluntary eugenics, which is, say, what Israel has practiced on a large scale to remove the genetic diseases that previously afflicted the Ashkenazi Jewish population to a very large extent, but which has now largely vanished from the population, and is undoubtedly has benefited many of their lives. So that's the accent that I make on this. If it's up to the individual choice, then I mean, at the end of the day, like we all engage in eugenics to some extent when we like do partner selection. You like is the like extreme suggestion to assign partners based on lotteries, just to make sure there's absolutely no eugenics going on at all.
That's, sorry, just a follow-up on that. That's quite a different direction though. Like individual practices and institutional rules are completely two different approaches. And do you see this thing as a very dangerous approach? You could be open a can of worms that you won't be able to deal with in the future.
I think that there's no practical way of stopping it, and the only question is whether it happens earlier or later, and I would prefer that it happens earlier, because that means faster innovation and more lives improved. Simply because once this kind of thing becomes commercially available, at least in some jurisdictions in the world, I mean the US is very bioliberal, Israel is bioliberal. Germany, I'm aware, is much less so. It bans selection for anything that doesn't sort of relate to serious diseases. I think that once several jurisdictions start offering it, then the rich people and connected people start using those services, and then there'll just be a lot of political recriminations and sort of conflict over like the ethics of barring it to some people, while other people who are more connected and mobile do actually make use of those services. So my main argument would be that it's not really perhaps even a super relevant consideration.
I really like that question, and I want to kind of follow up from the other side of it, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of two-part question. So first, would you agree that we don't know what exactly intelligence is? There's no kind of unified theory everyone agrees on. Let's say it's evolution or something more robust. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
I would say that there is a unified theory of intelligence. It's the ability to solve problems, the knowing what to do when you don't know what to do, as I mentioned at the start. And there's also the fact that the G factor, this idea that different cognitive abilities, they're all intercorrelated and they all load on a common factor of intelligence. So you can have a different sort of like bench press and a squat, but a person who has a bigger bench press probably has a better squat as well. And it's the same thing with intelligence. Yeah. It's the G factor, it's the single most replicated artifact in the psychological sciences.
Yeah. Well, we would slightly disagree, I guess, on the unified theory part, but there was no problem with that. I mean, given if that is we have a unified theory, would you agree that IQ tests are not perfectly measuring it, and it's more of an arbitrary test that measures something that might be related to intelligence, but this is not, of course, one-to-one? Do you agree with that?
No, I think properly administered IQ tests that involve a battery of tests across different domains, they actually do measure intelligence pretty accurately. So they correlate across age. So like if you get one IQ score relative to your cohort at the age of 5, then it will probably be very similar when you retest it at the age of 15 or 25.
Identical twins getting different IQ results by, orders of, well, not magnitude, but there's kind of a genius and then there's a lower bottom IQ, right, person when they're identical twins, but they're just separated and grew up in different scenarios.
Yeah, but on average, identical twins have very similar IQs. Yeah, because that's according to, and if they are raised separately. So there's heritability estimates derived from twin studies, which and they, like the vast majority of them, suggest that the heritability of intelligence is between 60 and 80%, in fact. So.
Well, but actually you have two heritabilities. One heritability is by twin studies, and second heritability is from actually an exact genetic variance. And typically, in majority of the cases, twin studies heritability is higher, because first, from one side, there are many genetic variants that we simply don't know. But there is also another, I would say, confounding variable. So typically, twins live together and they have like similar social factors. So at least on some estimates, it's around an adult IQ. It's around 75–80% heritability from twin studies, but only 23–24 heritability from what we know with genetic variants.